back I guess it was November, we had bond elections throughout the state of Texas. So I know you shared some good information with us back at a lunch meeting.
We had a lot of bond elections on the uniform election date. In Texas, we have bond elections in May and November only on the uniform election dates for those months. And in November, I saw some very predictable results. Cities and counties passed at an extremely high rate. School districts passed at a good rate for a November election. Not all of them passed, and I know the ones that failed. I know that stings. As a CFO for a school district, I was 5-1 on bond elections, passed the last five, lost that first one. And that one's back in like 1991 or so, and it still stings because it didn't just fail; it was slaughtered.
Oh, no.
And it always hurts because there's a lot of work that goes into these elections. So
Right.
I feel really bad for the school districts who legitimately need money for their bond projects and have not done what they needed to do to convince the voters to give that to them. But overall, it was a good day for school districts. I'm beginning to see some trends that probably started prior to the pandemic. Cities typically pass at a pretty high rate. Counties pass almost 100%. MUDs and other specialty districts pass almost at 100%. The caveat there being there may be a MUD, a municipal utility district out there that will pass hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion or more bond election by a 1-0 or 2-0 vote. That's
Right.
yeah.
Right.
That has always been curious to me. I think I have some reservations about that, but it is what it is. If that's all the voters you have in that district, and they're the ones who go to the polls, then that's democracy. But that mud business is very different business. What we see with
Yeah.
the school districts is very different. We can have an election cycle where there's a high passage rate. We can have another election cycle right after that, 6 months later, that is alarmingly low. And the things that are having difficulty passing, some of it is regional, some of it is topical. Topical items are stadiums. Stadiums are just a hot topic issue right now. Voters are not amenable to spending $100 million on a football stadium. They're just not. They've done it before. It's got some bad PR. Those are having trouble passing. Anything that is other co-curricular, like a swim center or track and field, all of those athletic facilities are struggling to pass. All of those performing arts centers, anything that might be band, choir, orchestra related, those are having trouble passing right now. The things that are passing are new schools, major renovations to old schools, and anything that is security or controlled access related to the school.
Right.
If you've got an old school and you need to build a new foyer onto the front of it to control access for people so they can't just walk into the school and go knock on a classroom door, those are passing at a very high rate right now. Regionally, what we see is there are some places where it is difficult to pass an election. If you look at the triangle between Houston and San Antonio, Austin, Waco, all the way up to Dallas, that triangle right there, those three major metro areas are passing at a pretty high rate. You get outside of that triangle and it gets more difficult to pass elections. You get more rural and conservative in those communities, and some of them are not always agreeable to giving the school district more money. And then also regionally, anything that you would call East Texas. And East Texas to me is east of Interstate 45 pretty
Mm-hmm.
much from Beaumont all the way up to the Red River. That is a different world, and school districts in that area are having an enormously difficult time passing bond election for anything. Now, this last November, that area did better than usual, but not everyone passed, and but it was a higher rate passage rate than usual. It just probably wasn't what everyone wanted up there, but that area historically has been very difficult to pass a bond election in.
You hit on that a little bit, conservative, a little bit more conservative there. Are there other things, other factors that kind of contribute to why that makes it more difficult? Is it just a mentality of, the good old boy? Well, David, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? It's worked for 100 years, so why do we need to make any changes? Is there a little bit of that
Exactly.
goes on?
Yeah. In some of the
Yeah.
rural areas, you have people who've lived there all their lives, and their thought
Mm-hmm.
is if that elementary school was good enough for me, it's good enough for
Absolutely.
my kids or my grandkids. Well,
Right.
education has changed in the last 50 years, and there's a
You
lot more
don't say.
technology, and these schools age, the foundations shift.
Yeah.
They're not wired for the computer
Right.
technology that is in the classroom these days. And in 50 years, pipes corrode. And at some
Mm-hmm.
point, you get to the point where you can't renovate a school. It's
Right.
cheaper to tear it down and rebuild it.
Right.
But in some places, you've got it's an antiquated term now, but Tea Party activists. They don't
Mm-hmm.
care what the money is for. They they don't want any more new debt. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it just end of sentence. There's no argument. There's no discussion. We just don't want any more debt. End of argument. And they're not going to vote for anything. And there are still pockets of those groups out there, and those pockets seem to be bigger in East Texas.
Gotcha. Yeah. Makes sense. It makes sense. Right. Most definitely the growth. I don't know if you want to say the forward thinkers are in the triangle that you're talking about,
Yes.
right? That's
Yeah.
where people are moving to. That's where people are taking their families and starting to raise families in those areas because there's just more opportunity, for them. Thanks a lot, David. We appreciate all that information. That's really great.